Well, good morning to everyone at the Methodist Church. I would love to have been with you to share with you, in person. But a great day is coming soon where we will be able to meet in person, and what a great time that will be. But I want to read from Philippians. I've been reading Philippians just recently, and there's so much in that, that letter that was written by Paul. And to be honest, I really struggled to choose a particular set of verses that I would like to read from, but I'm going to read from Philippians 1:12 to 26. It is in my Bible. I'm using a real Bible here, so I shall have my head down for a moment. But anyway, it goes like this. Now, I want you to know, brothers, that what has happened to me has really served to advance the gospel. As a result, it has become clear throughout the whole palace guard and to everyone else that I am in chains for Christ. Because of my chains, most of the brothers in the Lord have been encouraged to speak the word of God more courageously and fearlessly. It is true that some preach Christ out of envy and rivalry, but others out of goodwill. The latter do so in love, knowing that I am put here for the defense of the gospel. The former preach Christ out of selfish ambition, not sincerely, supposing that they can stir up trouble for me while I am in chains. But what does it matter? The important thing is that in every way, whether from false motives or true, Christ is preached. And because of this, I rejoice. Yes, I will continue to rejoice, for I know that through your prayers and the help given by the Spirit of Jesus Christ, what has happened to me will turn out for my deliverance. I eagerly expect and hope that I will in no way be ashamed, but will have sufficient courage so that now, as always, Christ will be exalted in my body, whether by life or by death. For to me, to live is Christ, and to die is gain. If I am going to go on living in the body, this will mean fruitful labor for me. Yet what shall I choose? I do not know. I am torn between the two. I desire to depart and be with Christ, which is better by far, but it is more necessary for you that I remain in the body. Convinced of this, I know that I will remain, and I will continue with all of you for you, and I will continue with all of you for your progress and joy in the faith, so that through my being with you again, your joy in Christ Jesus will overflow on account of me. I just think it's an amazing few verses there. Just a bit of the background here, and mostly this is from the NIV Study Bible, and a lot of this is I've also added some bits in myself. But Philippi was a Roman colony. It's a place where retired officers might reside. They were given land, and and maybe the people were fairly wealthy. Likely that there was a lack of Jewish people, as there are no Old Testament quotes. It was founded by Paul and Timothy on their second missionary journey, and you can read up about that in Acts chapter 16. It's primarily a letter of thanks for the gifts while Paul was in prison, most likely under house arrest in Rome, but a place where he was free to impart the gospel to whoever came to his home. And gifts were sent when they were learned of his imprisonment. The letter is a report on his own circumstances. It's an encouragement to stand firm in persecution and rejoice regardless of circumstances. The letter is to exhort them to humility and unity, to commend his fellow workers, Timothy and others. There's a few names in it I couldn't say actually, but anyway, you get the gist. And to warn against legalists and libertines who might actually take them off course. But the letter shows a strong and healthy, or as the NIV uses, a vigorous type of Christian living. It's self-humbling, it's dogged determination, with that pressing on towards the goal, that lack of anxiety and the ability to do all things. But this is what really jumped out at me about, when reading up about the notes. The letter is outstanding in its use of the word joy. in its various forms no less than 16 times. And yeah, our daughter, actually, funny enough, her middle name is Joy, and I've often said to her, why don't you pray prophetically into your own name, that you will really encounter that joy of the Lord? Because, you know, Nehemiah told the people, you know, that this isn't a day for grieving in Nehemiah chapter 8. He said, you know, the joy of the Lord is your strength. You know, when the joy of Christ, the joy of the Lord is within us, it really makes a difference. You know, and of course, Philippians, you know, that amazing, well, apparently it says the most Christological, big word for me, I'll tell you, but some Christ-centered, or a bit that speaks of, you know, about who Christ is, you know, in the New Testament. But for me, it's real joy, peace, and contentment that came across. Now, joy, I was looking up in the Ordinary Dictionary about what joy is. You know, it's a feeling of great pleasure and happiness. But I think it's something a little bit more. It's really deep down. It produces contentment. There's nothing like a bit of joy that produces contentment. I was so joyful to go out and see our daughter in the summer last year. And you know, we went on this lake, an amazing lake that we went and had a day trip out. And when coming back through the you know, for the roads in Romania, and you know, I've never seen this. Well, it probably happens in Europe, Eastern Europe, but outside their houses, there are people sitting outside at the end of their road, at the end of their houses, and they sit next to their neighbours. They might be drinking a cup of tea, and the joy that seems to, they're sitting there smiling. They might actually be moaning. I don't know, because I wouldn't understand even if I did. But when you think, you know, that Romania was a place which, you know, 30 odd years ago was a really difficult place. The gospel couldn't be preached. And certainly, you know, Manuel, my son-in-law, his grandparents speak of a time when there was severe persecution, and even his great-grandfather was actually imprisoned for his faith. And it's an immense privilege to be able to go out and be in Romania, but to see the joy, you know, for the people living in the freedom that they have. Anyway, that's just something, a bit of an aside. But I what gives you joy, you know? And for me, obviously there are some real obvious ones. You know, there's nothing like reuniting with the family again, to have young Emma, our granddaughter, come and stay. And of course, to get out and see our daughter and son-in-law, and of course have Nicola and Tom, and to just to be with family again. Of course, all of those things. But what really gives me joy on a regular basis is photographs. There is so much more than just a photograph. When I look at a photograph, and obviously being a photographer most of my life, they are more than just photographs. They are precious memories. And I love to see, you know, good photographs. There's nothing like going to an exhibition to see good photographs that really tell a story. Another thing that really gives me great joy is seeing someone overcome whatever their set of circumstances they have to, you know, enabling them to live life to the full. No wonder I get emotional when someone, you know, gets free from debt, or they get their house sorted out, or you know, and I'm talking about the reach work here, where we're involved, you know, in setting people from, you know, from their debts, or, you know, saving their home from you know, being repossessed. But quite simply, also, there's nothing like seeing a little seedling suddenly poke through the ground, and you think to yourself, there is new life. And you know, I'm so frustrated at the moment. I say, well, I'm not really, but I'm so wanting and ready. I've got enough seedlings to plant in our garden that I could plant one every day, and I still have more left over at the end of the year. I've got so many, and I'm so itching to get them out, and I want to see them come to life and bloom. But, you know, they give me so much joy, and I'm sure there are many things. And of course, there are many things that people, you know, that really rob people of the joy. And we'll come to that very shortly in a moment. But I think when I look at this verse here in Romans 1:21, and I'll read it just to make sure I get it correct, from the NIV. For me, to live is Christ, and to die is gain. You know, I'm a million miles from that, but that would be something I would really want to aspire to. You know, to actually be able to say that to live is Christ, but to die is gain. what on earth would you ever fear again in this world? Imagine what things would look like, with us these days. It's like Paul has such a win-win attitude. I have a relatively win-win attitude, but at the same time, there are so many things in life which, you could say are not a win-win attitude. For instance, when we weren't able to go to Romania at Christmas to see our daughter, I was absolutely gutted. And it's just minor things. Obviously, we've suffered recently with the loss of Angela's mother, and of course someone from your congregation there, Eileen. And there was never a win-win situation, but in some respects there is a win-win situation in it, because she's gone to be with Christ at the same time, and she's no longer in pain, and so there is a bit of a win-win attitude, but it still doesn't stop me missing her. When I didn't get accepted into the Methodist Church for Methodist ministry, I sulked probably for a couple of months. And yet, if I didn't actually, if I hadn't have got rejected from the Methodist Church, maybe Reach and people being helped, wouldn't happen. And I've been able to walk within my destiny, which God had already called me into, and so in some respects there is a win-win. I don't always feel it at the time. I'm trying to comfort my son and daughter-in-law when they lost their little baby. It was just so heartbreaking. I got nothing to say. And yet, if this baby had lived, our granddaughter Emma wouldn't, because it couldn't, it just couldn't have happened. And yet, so, you've got to really believe that somehow or other, God is in the process of working out things for our, all things work together for good, for his eternal purposes. And so I love the approach that Paul has, which is that win-win attitude. And just coming back to what I'd actually, written here, which is whatever happens to him, it doesn't seem to matter, because as long as he has Christ, that was all that mattered to him. In another part in Philippians, he says, I consider everything that I had, as rubbish. Well, actually, it's even worse than that. It's dung. It's real rubbish about having this relationship with Christ and to experience the fellowship of knowing Christ and experiencing the sufferings of Christ. And if I had that same approach, imagine living like this. In other words, if I live, fantastic. But if I die, even better. What a result. Oh, I don't feel like that though sometimes. I'd shy away from it. But when Christ is your source and your goal, anything else, petty rivalries and insecurities, completely insignificant. It doesn't matter about me. Paul's continual joy, even in prison, don't forget, even in chains, he's in prison, was because Christ was his source. It just didn't matter. I mean, I can't imagine being strung up in prison, and it weren't like prison today. And actually, let's sing hymns, folks, because we're in prison. I can't imagine myself doing that. I might not consider it pure joy when I face trials of every kind. I might struggle. I know, not I might, I will. I do. The most precious possession that Paul had was his relationship with Christ, both then and in the life to come. And that was what was important. No wonder he wrote what he wrote in chapter 2. Do nothing out of selfish ambition, but consider others better than yourself. And again in chapter 4, rejoice in the Lord always. He says, again, I say rejoice in the Lord always. Followed by that antidote to worry. And he says, pray. Pray in every set of circumstances, whatever the issue, pray. And ultimately, at the end of that, the book, the letter, to be content in whatever circumstances. Now that is really special. I so long for that, to be content with whatever set of circumstances. When it's suddenly not about me anymore, it's not about us anymore, but it's about Christ. Life takes on a new meaning. And I suppose really what I really wanted, and I'm wrapping this up very shortly, but was, and I've called it really lockdown fun, because one of the things I have a mentor who I've been working with for a long time, and one of my phrases that I often use is about not missing, making the most of every opportunity. And so when I don't make the most of an opportunity, I get really quite frustrated, or I did. But these days, there's what he calls, my chap who does the mentoring with me, he calls found opportunities. So in other words, instead of moping about the stuff, look for the found opportunity. Okay, it's not quite gone to plan, but look for the found opportunity. Now, sometimes I can throw my toys out the pram and I have to go and pick them back up again. But once I've picked them up, start looking for the, for these, for the found opportunities. And I was supposed to do a 3-month sabbatical last year, and of course we went into lockdown. Now, it was the most amazing time of an encounter with God, which I could never ever have scripted. And closer to the vision, closer to God. It was just the most amazing time. I planned to be busy as ever, but instead I just spent time reconnecting with the vision, reconnecting with God. And my life has taken on a different meaning as a result. No longer am I rushing around the place, looking for activity and exercise, but instead, just taking time, really valuing what's really important. And I guess you're probably doing the same. As I think about, and I'm going to share just a couple of little photographs here, because, when we were thrust into lockdown, Angela came to work from home, which was great because it meant that I wasn't at home alone. But she took up the dining room. Now, I always eat dinner at the table. I always eat dinner. And I always have use the dining room, but we couldn't because Angela was using it. And so I turned our little old, we call it the Tilly room because Nicola, when she was a little girl, couldn't say it, but it's got seedlings, it's got, or you name it, it's got anything in it it's an overflow space, as you can imagine. And so we put a little bit of Christmas lights in there, and I'm just going to share this little photograph with you, which was, in many respects, you could say, this was a found opportunity. We just put a couple of, old dust sheets up at the window, and we put these lights up, and we called it Tillies Bistro. And this is where we spent our Friday nights. We started off on Friday nights, and to be honest, we're still using it now. This is the great thing, because it's so special. One of the other things that one of the other benefits or bonuses, if you like, amount of times that we'd spent with our neighbours is almost nil. And I weren't really over keen on all this clapping for the NHS. Personally, I just thought it was a little bit shallow, personally. But and I thought to myself, get over yourself, Henry. And so I went outside and joined them on that. And you actually started to connect with the neighbours. And so with the clap, okay, we did the clapping, and I actually said hello, and it's almost like a time to check up on the neighbours. Are you all right? Everybody okay? Because and then suddenly, and of course when the VE Day was supposed to do these doorstep parties or anything else like that, that's exactly what we did. So we had this doorstep party where we gathered together on the grass outside. On the photograph that I'm sharing, hopefully you can see, is that we've got neighbours around the other side there. Some of the elderly neighbours. One's 91 and he even remembers the very first, VE celebration day, and so it was great. And we've actually been in his garden. We've had a drink with him, and we're going to go and do it again soon. Once the weather warms up. It's just been a great opportunity. We even did carols on the doorstep. So Tom and Nicola, because we were allowed to meet with Tom and Nicola and Emma. Come and steer on our doorstep, and we all gathered round with a glass or something, and we had some carols on the Sunday before Christmas. Never ever would have happened without the virus, without the lockdown, without these found opportunities. And, you know, another one that actually happened, and this one might make me a little bit emotional, but as you know, my mother-in-law, Eileen, got coronavirus towards the end of the year after spending some time in hospital. And there's no way she was going to spend time in a care home. She could come to us regardless of what happened, you know. And so she spent 3.5 weeks with us. Do you know what? This was so special. You know, when I was allowed to back out again after the isolation period, you know, I would purposely not be around so that Julia, who needed to come and help out Angela with looking after her mother, I'd come home in the evening and Eileen would say, "At lunch with my girls today." And I thought, it would never have happened if it hadn't been for the virus. I don't want the virus. I don't wish for the virus. Of course I don't. But so many good things have happened as a result. And yeah, I guess you could probably say the same, and I really am going to wrap this up. But, you know, when we make Christ our source of everything, our joy, it really is enough. You know, it's making the most of these found opportunities, you know, that we might be content in whatever the circumstances. There's a song that's been around for a while, and maybe Joe might even do this one, but which goes along the lines of this, you know, Christ, well, it's called Christ is Enough. I'm not even sure who it's by. It might be Hillsong actually, but Christ is my reward and all of my devotion. And there's nothing in this world that could ever satisfy. Through every trial, my soul will sing, no turning back, I've been set free. And then it goes on, Christ is enough for me. Christ is enough for me. Everything I need is in you. Christ is my all in all, the joy of my salvation, and this hope will never fail. Heaven is my home. Through every storm, my soul will sing. Jesus is here. To God be the glory. Christ is enough for me. When we make Christ enough for me, everything just seems to be insignificant. So whether, like Paul said at the end of his bit, he says, whether I'm, you know, well fed or whether I go without, I've learned the art to be content in every circumstances. For me, that's my goal. I was going to finish on Hebrews 12, but I'm going to finish on this one actually, because I love this one. I've got to find it now. I don't actually remember this one, but here we go. Yes, it is. I've got it underlined. And I'm not saying this because he goes on to say, you know, thanking them for their gifts. For I have learned to, I am not saying this is from chapter 4, verse 11. I'm not saying this because I am in need. For I've learned to be content, whatever the circumstances. I know what it is to be in need, and I know what it is to have plenty. I have learned the secret of being content in any and every situation, whether well-fed or hungry, whether living in plenty or living in want. I can do everything through him who gives me strength. You know what? When Christ is our all, no wonder there's so much joy that comes through in Philippians.